The holiday period in politics is over. The US elections are around the corner, less than 10 weeks from now. One of the most important questions for international politics and indeed for ordinary people across the world. Trump or Harris? Who will be the next president of the United States? And how is it going to change American relations with the old continent or not? Welcome to Warsaw Debate, a new TVP World series with me, Grzegorz Nawrocki, and my co-host, Małgorzata Bonikowska from the Center of International Relations.
We will bring you the insights and analysis from Central and Eastern Europe, as seen from Warsaw, the capital of Poland.
But the real picture of what's critically important for the region, discussed with our guests, experts, politicians, scholars, and with our audience here in this studio.
Well, so today, with the coming US elections, we will concentrate on Europe and America relations. What's next for us?
Well, the choice between the two candidates is really the choice between very different values, goals, agendas, and styles. Some people say democracy itself is on the ballot paper. Donald Trump doesn't care at all about the European Union. Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate, is much more committed to transatlantic relations. But are they going to deepen or weaken? Are we going to remain friends or become competitors?
Europe and America have been family for centuries. A former British colony, independent since the end of the 18th century, and a shelter for millions of immigrants from the old continent. That is how the United States of America was born and then grew to become a superpower.
They call him the Jungle Love.
The country absorbed immigrants from all over the world and became a real melting pot of nationalities. Today, only 60% of Americans have their roots in Europe. Chinese is the third most widely spoken language after English and Spanish. When the Europeans started 2 world wars, America got engaged. Americans went hand in hand with the Europeans, fighting against Nazism and fascism. During the Cold War, Western Europe was protected by American hard power against the Soviet Union under the umbrella of NATO. But with the collapse of the USSR and the rise of communist China, the US started to look in a different direction, towards Asia and the Indo-Pacific. Meanwhile, the European Union was expanding. Countries from the Eastern Bloc, including Poland, joined. And it seems that today no one was ready to hear President Donald Trump's words about NATO. They raised the eyebrows of America's European allies and led to what became known as strategic autonomy, a diplomatic expression for loosening mutual ties. That was until Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The war brought us closer again. But for how long? What is in the offing for our transatlantic alliance? Will economics help or hinder the relationship? Will big tech get in the way? When it comes to security, Europe still needs the protective umbrella of the US. At what price? While the world is increasingly divided, America and Europe still stand together as the global West. In November, the Americans will vote. Whoever ends up as president of the United States will have to decide about our transatlantic bond, to divorce or to stand by each other.
Well, Małgosia, we obviously share a lot when it comes to history, when it comes to politics. We obviously know that, but it's really the economy that is the main player in this European-American game now, is it not?
No, it is. Absolutely, you're right. The economy is absolutely fundamental for our relations. Let me give you some statistics. We have to look first on GDP. Let's take GDP in purchasing power standards. As you see, we have China here, of course, but we have also US and the EU. And if you just count together, it's over 31% of the total of the GDP in purchasing power standards. We are really economically strong. And let's be very frank, all over the world, there is really almost none of the country who is not in touch with the US or in the EU. You know, we are leading partners for almost everybody. So how we perform, it's important not only for us, it's also important for the world. Let's move on to trade and see some more. For example, EU export in services. Again, see, 22% US. Of course, with others also, UK, Switzerland, China, but US is definitely leading. And the number, 2022, it's really impressive. It's 500 billion euro. Let's see goods now. In goods trade, actually, you can see the trend, you know, we are really doing good business. The trend is really good. Export, very high number, 500 billion euro. Import, for the EU, it's 350, almost 350 billion euro. Means it's good for the EU because we have a surplus with the US. But let's be very frank. The US is our leading partner in trade. First in export, mean we sell to the US, but we also buy. We buy just number 2 after China. We buy more from China, but the US is also a very important partner. And finally, let's see the investment. Wow, just see the numbers. Numbers are really big, 2.1, 2.3 trillion euro, meaning we really invest. The EU invests in the US, US invests in the EU. But just to illustrate, the EU invests to the US 10 times more than India and China together. And the US invests still in the EU more, 4 times more than in Asia-Pacific region. It means something. That's where we are.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Thank you very much, Małgosia. So this is where we are. That's the background of this story. For this debate tonight, we've come with a statement that we're going to debate. It's European-American divorce is inevitable. And in a moment, you'll hear 2 speakers supporting this statement and 2 speakers opposing it. So please welcome our main guests tonight. And they are Professor Małgorzata Zachara-Szymańska, expert in global governance, Jagiellonian University from Krakow, and welcome to the show. Against the motion, Danuta Hübner, member of the European Parliament, until recently. For the motion, Rafał Olbiński, a world-acclaimed artist, but also an educator, living, teaching and working in the United States. Welcome to the program. And against the motion, against the statement, at least for the beginning, Tony Housh, chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the program. An American who spent most of his life in Europe. Is that true?
Absolutely, perfect.
All right. And, ladies and gentlemen, we're also joined by Professor Michael Kennedy, a sociologist and international affairs expert at Brown University, live from the United States. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
The Professor will comment on our discussion and wrap it up later on as we conclude. Right, there's an important message also. The audience has just voted on the motion. The result is actually quite extraordinary. It's 3% for the motion and 97% against. That rarely happens, really. So let's start this discussion with an opening statement from each of our speakers. We have allocated 2 minutes for each of them, and the first one to go is Professor Małgorzata Zachara-Szymańska. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So you might say, just look at them. Europe and America. What a lovely couple. There is communication, there's cooperation, they're helping Ukraine together. And you might be right, but only for this very moment, because this is a love moment in transatlantic relations. And we know that this moment inevitably gonna be followed by a major crisis. Why? Because this is a pattern, a destructive pattern of every love-hate relationship. And it's been going on forever. It started all romantically. So Europe in trouble, World War II, Winston Churchill called on Washington to come and help and save the old world. And they came. And they saved the old world. And they've been together ever since, because of the shadow of the Soviet Union. And Europe was like, I feel safe in your strong arms, America. I need protection, I need your security guarantees. And America was quite happy with reinforcing its image of a prime military empire. But then after the Cold War ended, a unilateral moment in global politics happened. A moment of excessive power, the kind of power that demoralizes. And this masculine image of the United States was hurt really badly by 9/11. And of course, these events, they caused a wave of compassion in Europe. Even the front page of Le Monde magazine claimed, we are all Americans now. But this moment of love lasted only 5 minutes, only to reveal growing divergence between the parties. And now China is part of the equation. Economic interests are increasingly different. There is no admiration. The only thing that's left, it's called pragmatism.
Thank you very much, Professor Zachara-Szymańska. That's it, 2 minutes over. Thank you very much. Now the arguments, the opposite side, Professor Danuta Hübner. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Right, yes. So I would like to say that there is no chance for the divorce. Nobody can afford it. It would be too costly for both America and us. I just read yesterday an article by Condoleezza Rice, you might remember the name, Secretary of State, and it was in the Foreign Affairs, and she just wrote 12 pages under the title, America Needs World, World Needs America. On the 12 pages, Europe is practically not mentioned, except for John Paul II, Lech Wałęsa, and the recent additions to NATO, Sweden and Finland. So I think what is missing there is exactly this second part of this title, which is Europe needs America and America needs Europe. And the first point I would like to make in this context is that we don't know today what will be the outcome of elections in the US, but we don't know either when the Commission, we will have the Commission, European Commission in place, because we are also not yet at the end of this political cycle in European Union. So we are talking about the future which we don't know. And for this future, I think today the most important issue, I'm sorry for Ukraine to call them issue, but it is an issue, is Ukraine. If Ukraine, for this marriage, I would say also it is very important, if Ukraine prevails against this criminal war of Putin, then we are fine. But if it is Putin that prevails, then immediately he and his minions, China, India, sorry for India, but certainly Iran and certainly North Korea will create a situation in the world which would lead to the dismantling of the current global system. So we are facing a lot of risks. Some of those risks can also be seen in this big book, Project 2025, on which I hope to be able to elaborate during our discussion. Thank you.
Danuta Hübner, thank you very much, Professor. And now Rafał Olbiński from the other side.
Wow. I need 2 minutes and
You've got 2 minutes, I'm
15
afraid.
seconds.
We can negotiate it,
Okay,
yes,
cool.
all right.
Henry Kissinger once said, to be enemy of America is very dangerous, but to be friend is folly. Where are we as European in this charade? First, a bit of history. America, is, to which we are referring, was established by European settlers and immigrants. The famous founding fathers were English aristocrats, educated in the spirit of enlightenment by the tradition of Roman Republic, Cincinnatus movement, and the European egalitarian culture. The American Revolution was financed practically entirely by France, what consequently led to France's economic catastrophe, the main cause of the nomen omen French Revolution. Up to First World War, the relations between Europe and the US were cozy. All the presidents were of Anglo-Saxon descent. America mirrored European culture and minded its own business. The First and Second World Wars changed the equilibrium, and US, dragged by British, became part of the European conflict. After these wars, America re-emerged as a superpower, let's call it imperium. The role of Europe is, in this relation, diminished dramatically. Division of the continent, American military presence, resulted in European dependency. The balance changed a bit by creation of European Union. With its demographic, intellectual and economic potential, Europe became competitive. Competition itself is very good for broadly understood progress, but on the other hand, empires tend to dominate, and America dominates with its military might, soft powers such as pop culture, monopolized media and social networks. Empire to continue to be empire has to extend itself. It cannot be confined, especially that on the horizon emerge new potential adversaries, China and to a certain extent Russia. Consequently, America is preparing itself for the open confrontation, integrating with allies and partners. Okay.
Just a sentence.
The last sentence, yes, on the lighter note, just to change the... You probably don't remember opera Nixon in China by John Adams. And by the way, this is not second president of the United States. By observing election 2024, I have this irresistible impression. What's the fantastic material for the comic opera? What's the fantastic cast of characters? Biden, Harris, Trump, singing their parts on the stage. Shakespeare wouldn't invent this better.
Right, thank you very much. We need to wrap it up. The voice of a skeptic on a lighter note then. Thank you very much, Rafał Olbiński. And finally, Tony Housh, with his couple of minutes for you.
Well, I'll be brief. There will be no divorce. As was mentioned, we can't afford the divorce. And why would we? It's the largest trading and investment relationship in the world. The numbers that you were shown earlier have increased by hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of bilateral investment over the years. The fact that we are largely mutually supporting Ukraine and defending democracy, free markets, how do we envision a world in which the US and Europe are not working together? Do we want to let the people running the People's Republic of China or other such countries dictate the lives and the prosperity for all of you, for your children, for your grandchildren? So that's what's at stake here. It's not just about fighting between the Commission and whatever administration is in Washington, because it's very important to look past the politics of whatever's going on in Brussels, whatever's going on, or whoever's sitting in the White House. The vast majority from multiple sources of research show that most Europeans and most Americans, by far, value the relationship, the transatlantic relationship, the security relationship, the commitment to shared values, and that doesn't mean agreement. That doesn't mean we don't fight and argue about lots of things. But the glue that holds us together, Europe and the US, is security, the possibility of prosperity, and the fact that we all prefer to live free lives in democratic countries. And that's why there won't be a divorce. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's open a discussion and have a chat about that. When we talk about the United States, we see it, we remember it from our history as an umbrella, really, in terms of our security, our economy, fight for freedom, free market, all of that. But really, things are changing around the world. They're changing in the United States. They're changing also in Europe. So the question is, should we redefine not even our policies towards our ties and relationships, but just our expectations about what can be fine or wrong about these relations?
Well, we always have to hope for the best, as we know, and be prepared for the worst, which is, I think, also the logic that we should use now, because there is this uncertainty that I mentioned. But I think there is the last 2 years and a half. We have worked hard, both on the US and EU, together to create a very, very solid foundation for the relations between America and Europe.
What you're talking about is in relation to the war in Ukraine?
No, it's not only Ukraine. I mentioned Ukraine because I was worrying that nobody would mention Ukraine, but I think Ukraine is absolutely fundamental, and Ukraine can really change the world. That's why it's so important. But I think what we have been working together for is just to have solid foundation to cope with the other challenges, with the climate, for example, with the AI, with all the newest technologies. We have the Trade and Technology Council, which we have established in June 2021, and we have had the last one, the sixth one at political level just in this year in April. And I hope that we will continue because we have really a framework.
But with all respect, Professor Hübner, but you are actually one of the people negotiating trade deal with the United. It didn't work, did it?
Well, I mean, we can discuss who failed. If you are talking about so-called TTIP, so trade and investment partnership, transatlantic trade investment partnership, it lasted nearly 3 years. And I was always feeling that finally Europe failed because we didn't understand that we had limited time because there were elections on the American side coming soon. And we just spent too much time on the internal problems in Europe. And that doesn't matter. It's gone. The momentum is gone.
It's our fault.
But I don't think it makes sense to look who is guilty. But I think if we have to, then I think that we could do more as Europe. But what is really important now is that we understand that we always had something, some institution, some framework in the past. There was before the Transatlantic Economic Council, there was this TTIP, there is now this TTC, and that this gives a momentum. And that's why if we don't have institutional framework to discuss, then it's very difficult to get ourselves organized.
Maybe the words from the skeptics. Should we change our expectations? Are we in a different world? For many reasons.
Definitely we should, because the world is changing very dynamically. And what is the problem in Europe is that Europe has this very strong post-imperial ambition still. And the United States still consider itself as a leading power. And of course, this is the leading economy in the world. And still, this is the most potent political entity in the world.
We treated them sort of like, we were talking about this part of Europe, the Central and Eastern Europe, a bit like a parent situation for many, many years. But now it's gone, it seems.
Yeah, well, the whole system is under transformation. And we should take this into account, that the system is in the moment of transformation, and you should, observing these other players because they have their voice. And there is no more situation when they are taking back seats and not want to, this leaders to move on.
Pardon me for simplifying this question, but we've raised it before. Is this going to weaken whatever's happening, or strengthen the relations, the transatlantic relations, in the future?
I think transatlantic relations, they have to be reconsidered because our expectations from the European side are just too expensive to be carried on by the United States, because strategic interest of the United States is, compete with China, and it is as simple as that.
And this is the ambiguity that we are going through.
I disagree with this.
Sure, of course, obviously. This is a debate.
Yeah, okay. So can I just pick it up now? Because I really think that both EU and US, we are together 30% of the GDP globally and all the trade and all these things, so we know.
Very impressive numbers.
Yes, that's very impressive. But that's exactly this global agency that we have together, which is very strong. I think this is something which we need, because EU-US is not only about bilateral relations, which have to be mutually supportive. We have to care about each other. That's absolutely clear, and I can talk about it a lot. But we are also responsible globally, and that's why US, in spite of the ambitions and the interests with China, and EU, in spite of our ambitions and also problems with China, we have also common objective and common task to do, which is cope with the world. Individually, we are not going to be effective and efficient. So that's why there's no way that the divorce can help.
There's a term that's already been brought up, I think, strategic autonomy. It's not a new one. I'm sure everybody knows that it's been just about 10 years old. So this button has already been pressed, but what does it... Tony, that's a question to you, as a matter of fact. What does it really mean today, this strategic autonomy, after more or less 10 years that it's been present in a public debate?
Well, if you give me 10 experts or government leaders, I'll probably get 10 different answers about what that means and to what degree. But I think it's often painted as a zero-sum game. Strategic autonomy, increased strategic autonomy for Europe doesn't mean divorcing from the US. It means taking a more robust role. It means making sure that it is in control. In foreign policy, in being able to formulate a unified foreign policy, in able to formulate a European defense industrial-based policy, in being able to make sure that the European contribution to NATO and out of NATO operations is actually capable, feasible, because that not only helps Europe have a better relationship with the US, it also increases Europe's standing as a player on the global stage. Because I think that Europe is rich enough, it is technologically advanced enough that it should play a bigger, more robust role. And I think almost anyone in Washington across the political and strategic spectrum would welcome that. But defining what that strategic autonomy is, I don't think it means divorce or lack of cooperation.
Well, that's what
enhancing our capability.
Let me just quote German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, because that's very much to the point. He says Europe must strengthen its strategic autonomy, whatever his definition is about that. But this doesn't mean distancing ourselves from the United States. But I'm just wondering whether that's possible at all. I'm sorry, but there's still Rafał.
Me? Okay, I'm sorry. Well. I agree with Chancellor Scholz that we have to strengthen our military potential, economic potential, blah, 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 all the potentials, to be the partner, equal partner to America, not to be kind of like butler.
Are we a butler now?
We are a butler now, absolutely.
I am not.
Right, okay.
Yes, we are, because we are forced to participate in the conflicts which are not in our interest. For example, conflict in Iraq, in Libya, which opened the Syria,
Rafał, what would
Pandora box of mass immigration, which is very bad for Europe. And Libya, for example, was the buffer against the mass immigration of Africa.
What change do we need for us not to be butlers anymore, in your opinion?
Well, economic exchange on the equal level, not being forced to buy more expensive energy from America than from other sources, and so on, so on. Of course, I am not expert in this. I'm just simply artisan observer
by the way, so let me just draw on this particular thing, just changing the subject ever so slightly. You're a person of arts and culture.
Yeah.
What do you think about this culture and artistic exchange between the United States?
Well, that's a very interesting story, actually. Probably deserved a separate discussion. The cultural relation America and Europe existed from the very beginning. As I said in my short discourse speech, tradition, European tradition actually founded America. And till the Second World War, Europe was America mirrored European culture.
Cradle of culture.
Paris, Rome, Munich, London was the centers of the culture. And everything changed abruptly.
But do you know why I ask this question in particular? Look, when we're talking about the European continent, European Union, we've got a lot of exchanges between students, between scientists, cultural exchange, and all of that. And there's scarcely any exchange between Europe and the United States. Of course, there's Fulbright, there are a few other programs, but they are very, very tiny. Is it not, I know we're changing the department a bit, but is it not, in your opinion, a bit of a political mistake not to have this kind of... Maybe we need something like an American-European Erasmus, Professor Hübner.
We do have a lot of instruments, but not enough. I mean, we have, I don't know, probably 10 chairs somewhere in different universities, but we should have much more. And Europe is financing also a lot of programs, also fellowships, and so a lot is happening. But that's, I think, like the just minimum. I think it's just the beginning. So we should do much more. Absolutely, I fully
Absolutely,
agree
we're
with you.
sending this message. If anybody from the Department of State in the United States or any kind of department that's responsible for it, we need something like an American European Erasmus.
Yes, right. But we also have to remember that we don't do any communication in America. Who knows that the relation between Europe and US creates 16 million jobs on both sides of the Atlantic, directly and indirectly through trade and investment. Nobody knows it. We don't communicate with the public. We just have those limited relations with the universities. But just one thing about the strategic autonomy, because the moment President Macron mentioned it, we immediately added the parliament. Many people added open strategic autonomy, which means making Europe much more assertive in whatever we are doing globally, but at the same time being open. And I think we are really delivering on this definitely. So I think that...
So if anything has changed from the moment that President Macron said these words, it's gone the right way.
The right way, absolutely. I think because we realize that Europe has in DNA openness, so it's just not for us to all of a sudden create something that would be behind the closed doors, the economy especially. But we also, when we talk about the dependency of why should Europe participate in the wars of US, but we want US to help also Ukraine, which some people in US say, well, it's European problem, so why should America be involved in this?
All right.
I think we have to be together to address all those global issues. There's no doubt about that.
Look, I will tell you something. I'm not allowed to ask this question. I sort of negotiated with myself to ask you about the next American elections, who's going to win. So I'm not asking this question, but I'm asking another question.
Because we don't know.
We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows, obviously. But are we prepared as Europe if things go bad?
Well, yeah, we definitely should be prepared.
But are we?
Well, you never know, are you? Yeah? But we have to take into account that this is a different America, as Europe is different, because everything's changing. And in the last election, Donald Trump won like 75 million votes, which is, in fact, the biggest numbers anyone in the history of American election won that and lose. Yeah? So this is an indication that Trump is still there, and this is actually the third cycle that Donald Trump is a major political figure.
Yeah. You actually said in one of the interviews that European politicians didn't have enough time to prepare for the second Trump presidency.
Well, because we always hoping the best, as Professor Hübner said, which I strongly agree with. Yeah, but whoever is gonna lead America this time is going to be dealing with a very fragmented society.
Sure.
And this is not the reality we don't know and we don't have here. And that's a problem. Society is changing and have different expectations. And then increasingly these political leaders, they have trouble in addressing those expectations.
Sure. Well, let's open up this discussion to our floor. I know there are lots and lots of questions. Okay, that's Małgosia, that's your department, yes.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Jan Ciesielski. I would like to ask you about the upcoming Polish presidency in the Council of the European Union. What impact might Polish leadership have on the transatlantic relationship? Thank you.
Anybody would like to answer this question? Yes, please, Tony.
I think that the fact that it has been very clearly stated that it's an intention of Poland, when they have the presidency, to make transatlantic relations an important discussion point, to see if there are not issues that can't be addressed, solved, or at least put on a pathway toward resolution and discussion, particularly in the institutional frameworks that we hear about. But I think what's also important in that is it's also a signal to the other member states of the European Union that, particularly with whatever happens in the US election, we need to have that discussion. We need to engage whatever happens, because that relationship is critical, it's important, and it will evolve. But I think it's an absolute good fortune for Europe, as well as for Poland, that this is a priority going forward.
Sure. Thank you very much, Tony.
Important period. It will be just with the new commission and also with the probably new president on the American side. We don't know what will be the post-electoral stability or not, but let's hope.
Lots of question marks.
A lot of question marks. Yes, I don't want to talk about that, but I want to say that this will be extremely difficult because we are now still working. So till the end of December, we will be working with the current administration administration, building on what we already have achieved. So as of January, I think it will be either continuation or it will be the need to convince also the American side that here we have the structure, we agreed with your predecessors. And
that
now
might be a hard job. That might be
might be hard,
job.
but maybe Poland, exactly, Poland is the country that can do it.
Yes, we're specialists in hard jobs sometimes. Okay, any other question from this part of... Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Anna Ostrowska and I study European Studies. And I have a question. What would be the implication for NATO if the US and Europe increasingly pursue divergent foreign policies? Thank you.
All right, so the question about our security umbrella. But yes, Professor Zachara-Szymańska.
It would be a catastrophe because NATO is a common platform, and we've seen this actually after the end of the Cold War, that the aim of the NATO was undefined, so grew undefined, and then the United States pursue its individual agenda with waging these wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the Europeans, they were quite skeptical about this. And that's the problem, because before it was easier because the strategic aim was really clear. We are securing themselves against Soviet Union.
Does Trump mean the end of NATO?
No.
I don't think so.
No, definitely not. I don't know. We are making the Trump like some horrible creature from the different planet. I was just talking to my friend from New York a couple of days ago, liberal, always voted Democratic. And he said, what would be the biggest tragedy if Trump will lose the election?
And doesn't accept the fact.
Exactly. That will cause the revolution, because this bunch of people who try to burn the Capitol, this time will be
that would actually mean, Rafał, that he is from another planet, an undemocratic planet.
No, I'm talking about... but I'm talking about what happened in America with this. I'm not judging who he is, but what would be the situation after he will lose. According to him, will be the revolution. And the people, these jerks from New Jersey, from the rednecks from Kansas, will be armed to the teeth, and they are unpredictable.
And
the National Guard will not shoot the American. So that would be the big problem.
Scary picture, really.
Right?
Don't you think
coming
that
from Kansas, I would tell you that not everyone feels exactly
Well,
But
I've never been to Kansas, so it's excuse me, yes, you are right, from Alabama.
Right, okay. We've sorted it out. Małgosia.
I just wanted to say, don't you think we have to bear with whoever wins? I mean, from the EU perspective, we are not voting, let's just be frank. It's America voting, and we have to bear with whoever wins the elections, right?
Right.
No, absolutely, and I think, but it's also important too when we look at the bigger strategic picture and the change in NATO, somewhat the change of the strategic relationship since the end of the Cold War. One of the things that I never hear discussed is the fact that most of Europe essentially disarmed. They took the peace dividend. They disarmed. The armies have virtually no capability, very little defense spending. So now, as new threats emerge, Europe finds itself in a more challenging position as it tries to rebuild its strategic defense autonomy.
It's actually one of the advantages that we can actually draw from this situation. If things go wrong, then we'll sort of grow up to become Okay, any other questions?
I think we have questions from this side. Yes, sorry. Maybe we can just take one more. Yes, please.
Hello, Magda Rusinowski, registered Democrat from the US, for full disclosure. And I wanted to ask, given this marriage has evolved into a union of more equal partners, with Europe getting stronger economically, in case Donald Trump wins second presidency, which will be a lot more unstable than the first one was, should Europe trust this type of partner, because any marriage requires a lot of trust, or should we look for different partners?
You mean China? Sorry.
For example.
All right, for example.
I will take it.
That's a tough question.
I would say that any marriage also requires a lot of common sense, a part of trust. So, trust is an important ingredient, but it's reasonable to go together, whoever is in charge in America.
In my opinion, Trump is predictable more than Kamala Harris. Nobody
in what
knows. Way? In a way that, well, in terms of relation with Europe, Trump, on personal level, has a lot to do with Europe. He plays golf in Scotland. He has two wives, one from Slovenia, another from Czech Republic. Yeah, that's true. And Kamala Harris has nothing to do with Europe. She'll be the first president, if she'll be the president, who doesn't understand Europe. Her administration, definitely fine. All the party machine, yes, definitely, will be inherited from Biden. But she herself, I'm not so sure.
Right. And just to follow what you said, I just remind what Tony also was saying that Trump has actually helped us to remilitarize, in a way, gave us this occasion. We are, in a way, in between Trump and Putin, no?
Yeah, so Putin helped more, I think, to mobilize us. But if I could just say one more thing about the NATO, because we forgot also that in Congress there is also a certain sort of security instrument, just not allowing leaving the NATO without also a say from Congress. You see how efficient it could be. Let's hope we will not test it. That's absolutely clear. But I also think that there's no doubt that we are considering this change on the other side of the Atlantic, and there is a lot of preparedness, I think, in terms of the solidity of the existing foundation, and we are adding, and we are thinking that we are on the safe side with this, that there will be no reason, because there will be not only President Trump alone and the rest of the world, there will be the whole administration. So I think we are also considering it, and there will be people around with whom we will be cooperating. And we also, you remember the previous Trump period when Jean-Claude Juncker was just sitting in July 2019, it was, or 18, 18, I think, talking with Trump and finding a common language. So I think we are prepared. I wouldn't worry about that. It would be much easier and it would be better for the world if we could cooperate on equal footing with the same values that we share.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from this part of the audience, perhaps? Yes, please. I'm running to you. Yeah.
Maciej Furmanek, Warsaw School of Economics. The main priority of US foreign policy is to reduce Chinese influence in the world. So I would like to ask, what are the prospects of the United States and the European Union developing a common policy towards Chinese technology giants like Huawei or Biden's? Thank you.
Right. So finally, the word China crops up in this discussion. I was waiting for it, and it's just coming. All right, China.
I'm afraid that we will be forced to participate in the war in Afghanistan or in Iraq, to be forced to fight with China, to participate in this potentially catastrophic conflict between America and China over Taiwan.
So you don't think we will make that choice on our own?
We will not make this choice because we are too weak as a right now, military.
Well, we're not that well, militarily, yes, but in other aspects, we're not just as weak.
Well, I wish we can be neutral in this conflict, but I'm afraid, personally, that will not be the case.
Right. Okay. So you don't believe it's going to be an autonomous,
as an artist,
autonomous decision? It will be pressure from the United States. Okay, let's go together against.
Like it happened in Iraq or Afghanistan.
But maybe we've learned something from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Not
we
really.
can take another stance on it.
We Poles, we didn't learn.
It was a failure strategically. We have to admit it. Yeah. So it is how it is. Look at Afghanistan recently with this new regulation towards, images of women in the public spaces. This is just outrageous. This is just, we're coming back to the medieval era. But coming back to China, I think if Europe agrees, because Europe has been actually flirting with China
with both sides.
From time to time. So if Europe agrees that China is actually a common enemy, that could be a unifying factor because,
but
this
then
is how
again,
it
Europe
works.
should say to the United States, okay, you don't want us to be with China, why don't you want to give us this trade agreement that we want to have with you? That would create a lot of business together, a lot of jobs, a lot of money transfer, and so on and so forth. Come on, do something. Maybe that's one of the issues that we should tackle with the next administration.
That has been blocking free trade agreement. They did do it with Canada because they see Canada as not threatening, as small and beneficial. But I think it's important to remember that protectionism in Europe is incredibly strong in many areas, and it's to the detriment of many countries within Europe. The powerful countries set that agenda on the trade relationship. And
but
that's
protectionists in America...
no, absolutely, and we have to fight against that as well, absolutely.
It's growing there as well.
But I would say that the US and Europe have agreed on some areas, and I think it sets the framework, for instance, clean 5G networks, and to look at the risk, because anytime you have third-party countries that have control over certain key critical infrastructure, that's important.
Okay, we've got time for just one more question.
Because we have our guests also from Hong Kong. Maybe there is a chance for them to put the question.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Oliver Chan from Hong Kong. So I have the question saying that since both you have mentioned that the commitment, the strong commitment, as well as this shared values shared by Europe and America makes this divorce is clearly not likely to happen. So, but if we look about the history of Japan, so Japan used to be one of the strongest partners of the US by security, shared values, as well as loads of trading deals. But what happened is by the 1990s, beginning of 1990s, Japan entered the pathetic periods of the last 20 or even 30 years because of the pressure of the US.
And what's the question?
So the question is, do you think the past of Japan is the future of Europe? If you believe so or not, that's the second question is, do you think how different Japan and Europe is? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's a difficult one.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah, but I think that this decrease in position in terms of Japan was also due to internal problems, and they were quite, they were really strong because, of course, Japan was this like a global economic miracle. So in 5 decades, they just grew their GDP on a really extraordinary pace. And, everybody was amazed. But then the structural grants for development were not, the pace of development was not enough. So I wouldn't say that what's happened in the 90s, that this crisis was predominantly due to American pressure. And I wouldn't say also that there is a competition in terms of who is the better ally between Europe and Japan, because obviously Europe has to have its regional policy in Asia because of China and I mean the US, but Europe also because we have a lot in common. This is my point.
The reason of the Japanese economical miracle was that Japan was impartial and neutral during the Korean War. Was supplier to that was the main reason for the miracle. Just on the map.
Yes. Okay.
But we just have to remember also that it doesn't, I mean, I'm not talking about the past now, but over the last 10, 15 years, the cooperation between the European and Japan has just skyrocketed. And we have the free trade agreement, we have the agreement on the IT, we have a very close cooperation indeed and extremely good relations on all occasions. And at the same time, Japan is also being a very often preferred state for US on many issues, which we don't get those relations with. So I think we are working in the triangle together, and I don't think that we have to repeat the history.
We're talking here about a topic that for many people might sound just a bit distant, playing out far away on the global political stage, but in fact, sooner than later, it will touch every one of us. The balance of power between big political actors such as the United States, the European Union, China, we talked about it, will knock on our doors in Warsaw, in Riga, in Vilnius, in Tallinn, or anywhere in the region. Poland knows it from bitter experience. So, after all, what are we left after this discussion today? With more on that, Małgorzata Bonikowska and her guest, Professor Michael Kennedy.
Michael, are you there?
I am here.
I just wonder, you know, you were hearing all this discussion, you were with us all this time. What's your take?
Very quickly, each speaker is right on one thing.
Each speaker is right.
On one thing. I would say Tony's right about the, important business relations we have between Europe and the United States. Certainly, Małgorzata is right, is that we're living through a system in transformation. Certainly, Danuta is right, is that the framework that we have for organizing our world is led by Europe and the United States for now. But Rafał is also right, because we can't imagine the future with social scientific imaginations. We need an artistic imagination. And it's a better art when we have more collaborative spirits. And here, I think, what Grzegorz said, and Małgorzata, you have also said to me, we need more ties between Europe and the United States when it comes to university learning, higher learning. So here, I think we can also agree.
Yeah, but I have to ask you one thing, because you are a sociologist. Tell us a little bit more about the American society today, how the Americans really see Europe. You know, we are discussing so many things. You are very Euro-oriented. What about Americans? Do they care what's happening here?
Of course, America varies terrifically in terms of its own demographics and also in terms of its attention. There's no question that more and more of America is paying more and more attention to the south of our world. And likewise, more and more Americans are paying more attention to Asia.
Yeah, but we are not on the south. We are somewhere else. So what about us? Are we losing attention?
Who's us? Is it
Europeans,
Europe or
yes.
is it Poland and East Central Europe?
We are Europeans too. Poland is in Europe, so both.
Poland is absolutely in Europe. And in fact, I don't remember who made the point, but that Poland is going to be the president of the European Council soon. History is not destiny. And in fact, strategy shapes the future. And it strikes me that Poland has this terrific opportunity to elevate not only Poland in the European-American relationship, but the alliance.
But that's exactly what we are doing with this debate. That's why we are discussing transatlantic relations. So coming back to my question, are Americans really interested in Europe, or they are really going away, with their interests as a society?
So as a society, I think it's a legitimate question. As a strategic partner, absolutely the US is not moving away from Europe. Why? Most obviously, and I'm so glad Danuta mentioned Ukraine. This contest is the one that has assured a US-European relationship, even when Republicans were being cautious, one might say.
But do you expect any changes, really? We don't want to discuss the elections, but do you fear that there will be a big change if there are, two candidates? If Trump wins, it will be different policy than Kamala?
So in my notes, I had prepared to say, you all might not be able to talk about the difference between them, but I can. And it makes sense, right? One of the things I would say is that it is wise for you in Poland and in Europe to be prepared for whoever wins. Absolutely. But we in America can't be neutral about this kind of trajectory, because Trump's foreign policy, at least international relations, is a transactional one. And it's a transactional one that puts America first. That is unpredictable, especially when it's tied to his own personal interests.
Okay.
By contrast, just briefly, Kamala Harris is inheriting the Biden team to some degree. They're going to change foreign policy leaders probably, but it's not going to change dramatically. And the significant thing about that style is that it's about relationship building. It's not about deal making. And I think that's an important difference to keep in mind.
Thank you. Thank you for these comments. Professor Kennedy.
From Brown University in the United States, live with us here at Warsaw Debate. Thank you very much, Małgorzata, for this talk. Now, a very important moment at this debate, because we're going to take another vote and see whether the results have changed in any way. Right, okay, so we do have results now. Not very surprising, though. 6%, we've translated it into percentages, 6% for and 94% against the motion. All right, so thank you very much indeed for today's debate. Thank you very much to our speakers, Małgorzata Zachara-Szymańska, Danuta Hübner, Rafał Olbiński, and Tony Housh. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, we will know much more on that after the November vote, pretty soon.
Pretty soon. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. This was Warsaw Debate on TVP World in cooperation with the Center for International Relations. For more content, follow us on tvpworld.com and on our social media. See you next time. Good night.